I know we're here today to talk about databases, but I'm going to start out this example by showing Microsoft Excel workbook and how similar that actually is to working with data in a database. So I've read in this Excel workbook. It's got two worksheets, and I can read those worksheets by double-clicking on their names. Open these up here. So really simple to read data, obviously, out of an Excel workbook. Well, it works actually in a very similar way in a database. And so I've got a database connection here to a Postgres server. This server happens to be running on my local machine, but by changing the host name, you'd be able to connect to any database. And we've got something that nobody would recommend, which is I've got my credentials here as plain text, but it's on my local machine, so I'm less concerned. But the way that you'd really want to store these is as Enso secrets in the Enso cloud. That way they're encrypted and they can be passed along to the database without anybody being able to see those credentials. Okay, so in the same way that we were able to read data from the Excel workbook, if I double click on one of these sheets, it's going to open up a query. That query is going to have the data in it for that particular table. I've already done that, so I've got a query set up here for the CRM and for the invoice data. And what I'm looking to do now is to clean up these EIN numbers and write this back into the database. And we're doing that using a text cleanse component. So it's the same components that you'd use for Excel. We're cleaning this data up here. So we've stripped out all of the symbols from the data, and we've got that cleaned up in the way that we'd like. And any one of the components that you're going to add here, until you explicitly add a read component, the processing is being pushed back into the database. So if we're joining data, if we're filtering data, we're returning just a subset of the data that way, as opposed to needing to read everything into memory. So I've cleaned up the EINs in both cases here. And now I'm going to write this back into the database, back into the tables. So you can see the data here that's still not quite right. We see the clean data here. That becomes our source table to clean up with. And we are matching on a key column. So in this case, I'm using the IDs from both of these systems to be that key column. And so whether we're writing to a database or to a file or to a web API, we require that a user explicitly says to do this. And in this case, we'll do that by just clicking on the Write All button here at the top. And you can see that it's processed the data, it's written it back into the database, and we've cleaned up the data in those tables. And we can hit this refresh button up here at the top, and we can see now when it requeries the data that the data has now been cleaned up. And it's just that simple to do in Enso.